Hello everyone, welcome to the video. My name is Maze and today I am going to be making this picture frame urn. So unfortunately, very recently, a close family member of mine, my mother's cousin, who was more like an uncle to me, passed away, and his wife approached me about making an urn for him, and I of course accepted immediately. And her one thing was she wanted it to be a picture frame with a place in the back for the ashes, but so she could put a picture of him in the front and then have his ashes in the back. So I looked it up online, saw some examples, and I set out to make my own. And so with that out of the way, let's make some dust. So first thing I did, like in every project, I cut myself off a chunk of cherry this time. I checked it on my table saw to see if it was warped, and it wasn't, so I didn't have to go to the jointer, so I went and cleaned up my edges on the table saw. And then took it over to the planer to make sure it was all uniform. And now I knew that it was perfectly square and symmetrical on all sides. So then I could take it over to the table saw and resaw it. I often get my wood in 1/4, and you see me resawing it a lot, so it's 3/4, and you could ask yourself, like, why don't you just buy 3/4 boards? But it has to do with having like wood grain that wraps around, that's continuous wood grain on your boxes. It's a lot easier if you have 1/4 material to work with, so you can match the grain a lot easier. And so then I took those back to the planer and planed them down so that they were 3/4 inch. And then I'm going to make the back part of the urn where the ashes are first. So I'm taking both my boards, and right now I'm cutting off what's going to be the sides of my box. And so I'm cutting the same amount off of one board and then the other board. And so once I have these two pieces, I can put them together, and these are at like they were in the tree, so their grain is as close as you're going to get. And I could take one of the other parts of the board and I could resaw this. This is going to be the back and the front, and so I want to book match them. So I'm going to saw them, and I want it to be about 1/4 inch, but I'm resawing them now, and then I'll fan them out so I can book match them. And so then I'll glue them together. And a book match is when you cut it down the middle, you resaw it, and then you open it up like a book, and then the grain patterns will mirror each other pretty close. It's not perfect, but it definitely reflect each other, and it looks just a lot better than if you just use two random boards. So right here I'm making the sides, and it's basically a skinny kind of box. And because it's an urn, and because this is someone's memorial remains, and because he was close to me, I wanted to take the time to do all my joinery by hand. Normally I would use power tools, at least, even though I'm doing joinery, I would do power tools, but I want to do as much of it by hand as I can. So I'm making dovetails for the sides. And so here I am just working on the tails, and you can see I'm using the Jonathan Katz Moses dovetail jig. I made the mallet for Wood by Right, and I won a pair of chisels and this jig, and so this is my first time really putting it to use, and I like it. I mean, I could do dovetails without it, and I don't feel that it makes them any better, but it makes them faster. Like, I don't have to spend so much time meticulously laying them out. The jig does all the angles for me. All I have to do really is the lines across the top, and then the jig does the rest of it. and it's kind of like once you get it going, you don't think about it. So it doesn't make them better, it makes them easier and faster, if that makes sense. So if you're thinking about it, I like it. I mean, I could do it without them, and I'm going to be using it, so that should really tell you all you need to know. And so then here I am doing the pin side. And this side, normally I would just take these over to the scroll saw and cut out the wood in between. But like I said, I wanted to do all the joinery by hand, so I ended up using the chisel to chop them out. And then I used the file to clean up my points of contact, especially where the glue is going to be, just to make sure it fits together real well. So that's how it came out on my first one with the jig. It's alright, it's a little proud, but some sanding. And I always use some sawdust and wood glue to go over my joints anyway, just to make sure that they look good. And so now this is my book matched parts, the front and back, and so I'm planing them to make sure they're even. That's my best friend in the world right there. He came to hang out in the shop for a little bit. Didn't have any earmuffs for him. And so then I used the router to cut out a rebate, or a rabbet if you're in England. I know this is technically a joint, and I said I was going to do all the joinery by hand, but I used the router. I don't have a rebate plane, and doing them with the chisel, this kind of size, I've never really had much success in making them good, so I went with the router. And then went to the table saw to cut off a piece so that I could glue into the back. So you could see me checking the fit constantly, and instead of measuring it and trying to, use a ruler, I'm just sneaking up on it, using the ruler to measure it a little bit bigger, and then sneaking up on the cut. Here I'm using the ruler because I have the center line from the book match, and so I'm trying to figure out how much I have to take off of each side so that I keep the glue line of the book match centered so that it looks good. And then I use the hand plane to flush up my joints and sanded everything to 220. I'll end up sanding it again, but I always like to sand it at different stages, so it makes it so when I sand it at the end I have to do a lot less work. And then I could take the sawdust from that and I could use it with some wood glue, and it makes kind of like a wood filler that I could use to rub into all my joinery. It's kind of off camera, but I'm just going over my dovetails to make sure that if there is any gaps, they get filled in and won't be as noticeable. And so then now I need ledges for the top to set in, so you could screw the top in, you could put the ashes in, then set the top on it and screw it in. That's how most urns are made. And so I'm ripping off some pieces so I could make that little ledge. So then I cut those to size. I did this by hand too, just wanted to try and do as much by hand as possible. And then I glued and clamped those in. I also did them on the top and bottom, but here I'm just doing the sides first. So you could see kind of the wood filler and how it's spread out over the joint. Most of that's going to sand off, and once it has some finish on it, you won't even really be able to see it. It looks bad now, but it disappears. You sand most of it off and then it kind of blends in. And my gaps actually didn't need it that much, but here I am just sizing the top. And again, I'm trying to keep that glue joint centered so that it looks good. And again, I've just used the ruler to kind of get me in the ballpark, but large, and then feather it down and sneak up on the cut to try to get as tight a fit as possible. And this is pretty much where I'm going to end part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 and possibly part 3, where I finish up this project. And that's the video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked it. If you did, if you would hit that like button, I'd very much appreciate it. And before you go, I got a special announcement from everybody's favorite YouTuber, PewDiePie.
Smash, subscribe, smash, subscribe, smash, subscribe, smash, subscribe, smash, subscribe! What are we gonna do? Smash, subscribe, that's right.
That is right, PewDiePie. Thank you very much. And as always, support your local craftsmen or get out in your workshops and make your own dust.